Hello everyone, this is part 29 of What If Naruto Was the Devil Ninja, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Since the Colosseum had been destroyed, the three factions rating game had been short, and the members who'd participated all went back to their regular lives. The angels returned to heaven, the fallen returned to their home, the devils went back to their mansions, and the Gremory peerage returned to Kuo in the human world. Life went back to normal. Explosions rocked the training area in the backyard of the mansion that the Gremory peerage lived in. The training ground, becoming liquid like magma. Steam hissed all around the field as the superheated sand emitted powerful heat waves that distorted the atmosphere. A small figure darted between the balls of fire. The figure was Koneko. She wove between the fire, which ranged from tiny spheres that exploded as they hit the ground to large cones that were so hot the ground melted. Meanwhile, high above her, flying on wings made of fire, Ravel continued launching attack after attack. "How have you gotten so fast?" Ravel asked in a loud shout that rang out over the explosions. "I thought you were a rook." Koneko didn't respond with words. She kept darting past each attack that came her way. Sweat poured from her brow. There was a frown on her face. While these attacks all came really close to hitting her, so close that fire and heat washed over her like an avalanche, none of them were actually close to landing a true hit. Most would have assumed this was all her doing. Koneko knew better. Ravel is missing me on purpose. Thanks to her ability to use nature chakra, Koneko could sense the intentions of others, to some degree at least. She wasn't as good at it as Naruto was. Still, it was enough to let her know that these near misses were intentional. The only question Koneko could ask now was, what was Ravel planning? She soon found out when cracks appeared along the ground. The area around her caved in and lava gushed out from the cracks, forcing Koneko out the air. She used her wings to fly. However, Koneko was a cat, not a bird. Even if her wings theoretically allowed her to fly, she did not have the predisposition for it. Ravel took advantage of that, as she flipped end over end. Sadly, she couldn't recover either because her opponent launched another attack, a fire blast that soared toward her like a spear. The attack was powerful, certainly, but Koneko didn't let that bother her as she readied her fist, straightened her flight, channeled nature chakra her punch, and literally demolished the flaming attack with naught but her fist. The attack was still powerful, however, and Koneko was pushed backward by the destructive force. She landed on the ground. Ravel was still in the air. She and Ravel looked at each other, one floating high over the other. Despite this being a spar, both of them were treating it as though they were in a real life or death battle. They'd thrown any number of techniques, so many that even Naruto thought it looked like they were trying to KO each other. "You're pretty strong for a kitten," Ravel said with a glare. "You're strong for fried chicken," was Koneko's immediate. "Don't call me that." Ravel created another pillar of fire underneath Koneko, though it was easily avoided. This didn't deter her and she launched more and more attacks, all with the purpose of hitting Koneko, though it didn't look like her attack were doing much. Once again, however, Ravel was using her abilities to trap Koneko, not hit her outright. This was as much a battle of wits as it was a sparring match between friends. It didn't matter if she trapped Koneko or not. When that happened, Koneko used her nature chakra abilities to destroy Ravel's flames. At some point, the two became completely exhausted. Naruto, who'd been watching the spar from start to finish, looked at the pair as they sat on the ground, their backs leaning against each other as they breathed heavily enough that it looked like they'd run a marathon. "Good work, you two," he said. "Why don't you go wash up? I'm sure breakfast will be ready soon." Ravel and Koneko had begun training together only recently. Naruto wasn't sure when they decided to start training with each other, but they had asked him to watch them when they did. He'd done as they asked and watched them spar every morning for the past week. He was surprised, though. He didn't think Ravel cared about getting stronger. "Are you going to join us in the bath?" asked Koneko. While Ravel looked at her shoes, Naruto shook his H. "Not this time. I actually have something else that I need to do." Naruto watched both of their expressions shift to disappointment, but it was his turn to check on Rosweiss. They had discovered early on in the days she started living with them that Rosweiss was a very serious person. However, she was also very susceptible to teasing and tended to get upset easily. It supposedly had something to do with the way she had been treated when she was working under Odin. Rosweiss also suffered from night terrors. That was, Naruto suspected, a side effect from having her mind controlled with something infused with nature chakra. He found Rosweiss in her bedroom. She wasn't alone this time, which was probably fortunate. Irina, and Office oddly enough, were with her. Rosweiss was wearing a dark grey business suit with a short skirt. She sat on a stool while Irina sat behind her and combed her hair. "You have such long and pretty hair," Irina complimented. "I wish I had hair like this." "Oh, thank you," Rosweiss said. Judging from how she blushed, it seemed she wasn't able to take compliments very well, another result of her treatment at the hands of Odin and her fellow Valkyrie, no doubt. "If I had hair like yours, I bet I would look even more like an angel." Right. You girls should really lock the door, Naruto said as he walked in. Quote. He was teasing, of course. That kind of thing didn't happen in real life, at least, not often. However, given that he, Kiba, Issei, and Gasper were all living with them, it was definitely important to lock the doors, lest one of them accidentally walk in and find themselves in a compromising situation. That would never happen, Irina said with a laugh, though her cheeks did turn red. Naruto, please do not joke about such things, Rosweiss, her hair now combed and perfectly straight like a shimmering waterfall, said. I know that you are something of a joker, but all jokes have a time and place. Please keep that in mind. Yes, Naruto waved her off with a smile. Anyway, breakfast is probably ready by now, so come down once you're finished. It's a big day for you three. School was starting up again, and since these three had become official members of this house, they were all going to be attending school. Office was going to Kuo Academy as a freshman alongside Ravel and Koneko. Meanwhile, Irina was going to be in the same grade as him, Issei, and Kiba, while Rosweiss was going to be a teacher. He had no idea how this was going to turn out. Rosweiss was a serious woman who always took every matter, whether that was shopping at a 100-yen store or lecturing Issei on why he shouldn't be so ill, as if it was a matter of life and death. Given that she was going to be his homeroom teacher, he could only wonder. Either way, it was sure to be interesting. Devil Ninja. Then we are all in agreement? Sirex asked as he looked around the conference table. Sitting at the table with him was Michael, Azazel, Gabrielle, Barakil, several other members of the Archangels and the Grigori. There was also his compatriots, Seraphal Leviathan, Ajuka Beelzebub, and Falbium Asmodeus. In total, there were 20 people present. The table they sat on was not round, but it wasn't rectangular either. It curved to create a strange wave-like aesthetic. No one sat at the H. Since this alliance was one in which there were no true leaders, they had decided that AH was unnecessary. Sirex sat in the middle with Michael on one side and Shemhazai on the other. They had been debating the matter of what to do with Loki and his takeover of Asgard, which they had learned about from Rosweiss, for over a week now. This was a serious issue. No, it wasn't just serious. Loki had KO'd and taken over Asgard, its people using strange devices that none of them had ever seen and even Ajuka couldn't analyze. All they knew was that it used nature energy. They only knew that because Naruto had told them that he sensed nature chakra coming from it during his fight with Rosweiss. I believe we are, Michael said at last. Are we really sure it's a wise idea to send in an army? Asked Shemhazai. He was a member of the Grigori, and its newest leader. Azazel had resigned some time ago, claiming that he wasn't a good leader. We still don't know the full situation. We'll probably never know the full situation, Seraphal said, currently acting the part of a Maru and not a crazy magical girl. I think it's better to take the initiative than it is to wait for him to attack us, especially since we don't know what he's planning. Point, Shemhazai said with a nod. Then that's how it will be, Sirex said, standing up and placing his hands on the table. In 2 days' time, we'll travel to Asgard, free all of the people who've been placed under Loki's control, and defeat Loki. Let's end this in one decisive battle. Before Ragnarok can begin, Michael added with a serious nod. Everyone nodded in agreement. Devil Ninja. Since they were all going to the same place, everyone walked to school together, chatting away as if nothing had happened this summer, as if they hadn't survived a life or death situation in the underworld. They drew a lot of attention as well. Perhaps it was because of how many people there were, or maybe it was because more than half of those people were gorgeous women, but everyone stopped and stared as they walked, especially when they reached Kuo Academy and strolled through the gates. I feel like we've suddenly turned mice in the middle of a group of cats, Rosweiss mumbled as she eyed the students that stared at him, and her in particular. Being the newest, and a mature hottie to boot, Naruto could understand why she was being given more attention than Office and Irina. A mature adult woman was infinitely more interesting to horny teenagers than two girls their own age. That was just how things went with boys. Just ignore the crowd, Koneko said. They're a bunch of cowards anyway. The most they'll do is stare. Okay, then. I'll follow your advice. Koneko gave Rosweiss a thumbs up. You're golden, Rossi. What? I'll show you to the principal's office, Rias said as they stepped out the school building. Oh. Thank you, Rosweiss said with a bow. There were steps to follow. Rosweiss had given him the stink eye for some reason, or maybe she'd been giving the girls the stink eye. It was hard to tell. Naruto shared classes with Kiba. As they walked into the homeroom, Kiba was assaulted on all sides from the girls in their class. Kya, Kiba-kun, how was your summer? Did you have fun? You should have called me. Isu wanted to spend time with you. Yeah, I even got a cute swimsuit that I wish you could have seen. Ladies, Kiba greeted with an easygoing smile. Only Naruto noticed the tick mark on his H. I'd love to have spent time with all of you, but my club and I actually had some important work to do this summer. Sorry. Kiba looked at Naruto, the way his face twisted into a grimace, as though in pain, practically begged him for help. Naruto just smiled as if to say, you're on your own, buddy, and walked over to his seat. The way Kiba's face morphed one of betrayal tickled his funny bone. Class eventually settled down, though it took 15 minutes of girls squealing and guys giving Kiba the death glare, and it was during this time that Rosweiss entered the room. It was almost funny. The moment Rosweiss stepped in, every single H turned to her with machine-like precision. Many of the guys suddenly went beet red, or they started drooling while the girls eyed her like she was Kampion. Either way, Rosweiss appeared to have finally mastered her surprise at being gawked at, for she didn't respond to their blatant "oh." Rias must have given her a pep talk. Good morning, class. Rosweiss adjusted her glasses, which he noticed she hadn't been wearing until this morning. They must have been for aesthetic purposes. My name is Rosweiss, and I'm going to be your new homeroom teacher. I'm not very experienced as a teacher, but I hope we can all get along. While many of the boys cheered at his proclamation, the girls just groaned and gave the appearance of people who wanted to S their H against the table. They probably thought she was Kampion for Kiba's affection, or something to that effect. Hey, teacher, one of the students said. He was a young man with spiky brown hair and blue eyes. Naruto thought his name was Oshizuku, or something like that. Would you mind if we asked you some questions? You know, to get to know you better. Rosweiss paused. She had been prepared to dive right into their lecture, but now she was considering the young man's question with a seriousness that Naruto didn't think it deserved. Well, I don't see why not, she said. Giving these brats permission to ask her questions was a mistake. The moment she said it was okay, the boys all stood from their seats and began firing off questions at a rapid rate that made Rosweiss's H spin. Quote, I can't tell you that. Quote, that question is rude. Do you have a boyfriend? Well, no, I don't, but. Have you ever had a boyfriend? Well, I have not. Then doesn't that mean you're A versus? Our teacher is AV who's never had a boyfriend. While Rosweiss's face had been growing periodically red thanks to the rude questions, her face suddenly froze with that last question. Not only that, but it began paling rapidly as tears welled up in the woman's large blue eyes. It's true. I've never had a boyfriend. Rosweiss suddenly started crying in earnest, tears streaming from her eyes like nothing else. They reminded Naruto of waterfalls. Go H and laugh at me. I don't care anymore. Wah. No one seemed to know what they should do. Rosweiss was on the ground, bawling her eyes out like a child who'd just been spanked by their parent. Even Naruto didn't know what to do. In the few days that he had known her, Rosweiss had never once responded to a question like this. What's more, it made the mature aura that surrounded her evaporate like a fire jutsu being doused with a water jutsu. What should we do? The new teacher is crying. This is all the fault of you boys. What? How is this our fault? If you hadn't asked her so many questions, this wouldn't have happened. As the girls used this opportunity to browbeat the boys about their Naruto continued staring at Rosweiss in shock. Seriously, where did that stern young woman disappear to? It looked like Rosweiss wasn't as mature as he had first assumed, or maybe she had merely been putting up a front this whole time. Naruto ignored the argument, stood up, and made his way to the front of the classroom. He stepped in front of Rosweiss, put his ring finger and thumb in his mouth, and whistled, loudly, so loud that the noise pierced the air and made everyone stop arguing. Even Rosweiss ceased crying when he did that. All of you need to shut up and sit down, Naruto commanded. Everyone sat in their seats and closed their mouths with a loud clacking sound. He nodded. Good. Now, I'm going to take Rosweiss to the nurse's office. You have free study period until then. Kiba, keep an eye on everyone, will you? If anyone acts out, list them down and tell me later. I'll make sure they regret acting out. You got it, Naruto, Kiba said. Several people shuddered at this threat, no doubt trying to imagine what sort of prank he'll pull on them if they act out. While he hadn't pulled a prank in a while, everyone was aware of the pranks he used to pull, and they had better believe he would prank their into next week if they didn't listen to him. Turning to Rosweiss, Naruto extended a hand. Come on, let me help you up. I can stand on my own, Rosweiss suddenly muttered, turning her away from him. Don't be so stubborn, Naruto said as he reached down and grabbed Rosweiss' hand. She let out a mouse-like squeak as he helped her up. There's nothing wrong with accepting help. Now, come on, let's get you to the nurse's office. Oh, no. I'm really all right, Rosweiss tried to say as he dragged her out of the classroom. I really should be starting this morning's lesson. You aren't in any condition to teach right now, Naruto rebutted. Now come on. Left with no other option, Rosweiss grew silent as Naruto pulled her to the nurse's office, which was really just a large room made of white tiles, white walls, and a white ceiling. Several beds were located in the nurse's office. Naruto ignored those since Rosweiss wasn't sick. The room was empty. Since it wasn't being used, Naruto had her sit down on the chair by the desk, then made her a cup of jasmine tea. Here, drink this, he said. Oh, thank you. Rosweiss accepted the tea and took a tentative sip. After the first sip, she took another, and then another. It looked like she liked this kind of tea. Are you feeling better? Asked Naruto. Yes, a little. Rosweiss blushed. I'm sorry you and the other students had to see me in such an unsightly manner. Do you want to talk about it? When Rosweiss stared at him, he added, You don't have to. I just thought it might help. There's not a whole lot to talk about, Rosweiss said with a sigh. It's just as you've heard. I'm 19 years old already, and I've never once had a boyfriend. Back in Asgard, everyone used to make fun of me for it. They would always call me awful nicknames like the Valkyrie who's never had a boyfriend. They said it was because I was too stiff, and that no man would want to date a woman who was so serious all the time. They also made fun of me a lot for being Odin's aide, calling me his secretary on the side, and other crude nicknames. Sounds like you've had it rough. When Rosweiss finished her tea, Naruto took the cup from her and set it on the table. I don't know what their problem is, but I think they were just jealous. Jealous? Rosweiss blinked. Because you're so pretty, Naruto clarified. I am. Rosweiss looked down at her lap. Of course you are, Naruto said, sighing. What was with these girls who seemed unable to realize their own beauty? It was stupid. You're gorgeous. Any guy would be blessed to date you. That's probably why the other Valkyries kept making fun of you. They were worried you'd steal their men away from them. Is she blushing? Thank you, Rosweiss mumbled. It's nice of you to say that, even if you don't mean it. What makes you think I don't mean it? Rosweiss looked back at him as he grinned. I would totally date you. Rosweiss squeaked. Anyway, now that you're feeling better, do you think you can go back to class and teach? He held out his hand. Don't worry. If anyone says anything stupid again, I'll take care of them. Rosweiss hesitated for another second before tentatively putting her hand into his, letting him pull her to her feet. I think I can, she said. That's the spirit. Now let's go back to class. With Naruto leading the way, the two headed back to the classroom. What an interesting start to the new school semester. Devil Ninja. Like most higher dimensions, getting to Asgard required someone to activate the gate from the other side, normally. In most circumstances, the person who activated the gate to Asgard was Heimdall, known in the mythology as the whitest of the gods. He was the one who possessed foreknowledge, keen eyesight, hearing, and kept watch for Ragnarok. However, since the likelihood of Heimdall being controlled by Loki was high, they had to use another method. Are you sure that device of yours is going to work? Michael asked Azazel as they stood in the center of several stones jutting from the ground. The area around them was nothing but dirt. Past the stones, which formed a circle around them, grass encroached upon the earth. Azazel was holding a staff in his hands. Archaic symbols ran along its surface, glittering silver in the light. The staff had been forged from the remains of Gungnir, Odin's staff, which had been destroyed by Loki. According to Azazel, they could use it to forcibly open the gate to Asgard. Of course, I'm sure. Azazel began channeling energy through the staff, which was basically the same as an artificial sacred gear now. Ajuka and I ran all kinds of tests on this thing. There's no way it can't not work. Trust me. Michael, Azazel, Syrinx, Shemhazai, Gabrielle, and Seraphal were standing in the center of the circle. However, they were not alone. Each of them had brought an army with them. Arrayed around the circle, some hovering in the air and some standing, were over 10,000 angels, devils, and fallen angels. They had changed the uniforms. Since they had become an alliance, everyone had decided to give them matching uniforms. Dark blue pants and shirt with light blue piping wrinkled as wings flapped. Gleaming silver bead shone in the light. Shoulder pauldrons and greaves clinked together. Everyone was wearing gladiator sandals. It was a very basic uniform, but they thought it suited their new coalition, and it should help prevent friendly fire. The place where they were now was the location of the gate that led to Asgard. Technically, the gate could be activated anywhere in the world, but only Heimdall had the power to do that. That meant in order to open the gate, there were 3 items they needed: a location within the country of Asgard's origin that was strong in magic, an item that had ties to Asgard, and several people with the powers of an ultimate class being. Fortunately, with 2 archangels, 2 leaders of the fallen, and 2 mass, they weren't in short supply of power. They also had Gungnir, and the place they were at was in Germany, where Norse mythology originated from. I don't have much choice but to trust you, Michael said with a sigh. Don't worry too much, Michael, Syrinx said, standing next to Seraphal. Azazel might be a bit of an airhead, but you can trust that his ideas, at least, are almost always correct. Azazel laughed off Syrex's insult. Listen to Lucifer. He knows what he's talking about. Michael just sighed again. It was eventually time for them to get started. The new moon was high above them, a symbol of new beginnings and one of the more powerful times of night. He, Gabrielle, Shemhazai, Syrinx, and Seraphal stood around Azazel in a circle, channeling their energy into the staff that Azazel held, while Azazel s the butt of Gungnir into the ground. A soft ding rang out from the point of impact, echoing with an abnormal loudness, the ringing sound spreading across the entire clearing. It was obnoxious. However, none of them paid attention to that. They were more focused on how the staff was lit up. The symbols, written in the ancient Nordic language, pulsated several times. With each pulsation, the staff's glow grew brighter, until, without warning, everyone standing in the circle felt something pulling them. It was like they were being sucked into a vacuum. When the sensation of being sucked into a vacuum finally stopped, they were not standing in the clearing. A circular plate made of polished stone was beneath their feet. There was a large circle behind them, a gateway made of a unique metal that none of them had ever seen before. The gateway was inactive just then. Heimdall, the guardian who should have been in front of this gate, was nowhere to be found. It looks like we're the only ones who made it through, Syrinx said. Seems that way. Michael looked around. I cannot see our army anyway, which means they are still on the other side. Azazel, Gabrielle asked, is there a way to open the gate now that we're on the other side? Azazel tried to open the gate via Gungnir several times. Theoretically, It was possible for someone who didn't belong to that specific myth to open the gate from Asgard to the human world. However, no matter how many times Azazel tried, nothing he did worked. That was when Michael realized it. I believe this is a trap, he said. Syrex nodded. I was thinking the same thing. It looks like Loki knew that we would come for him. In that case, Shemhazai began, the only thing we can do now is continue to press forward. I agree, Seraphal said. The group of 6 walked along a broad walkway that overlooked an ocean. The still waters were calm, eerily so, but then, the silence was also quite eerie. Up ahead stood Asgard, the stronghold of the Norse gods. Massive towers and large buildings sat upon the rocky outcroppings of a gigantic mountain range. The largest of these buildings, Odin's palace, sat in the center, on a large mountain that looked like a city had been built into it. It's too quiet, Gabrielle muttered as she looked at the buildings they passed. If this is a trap, then that is only natural, Michael said. This is the cliched, silence before they spring the trap, part, Azazel added. It was true that it was far too silent there, but it wasn't just that. It was the complete and utter lack of people that disconcerted him the most. Asgard should have been filled with the Asgardians, the Norse gods and goddesses who ruled over Germanic myths. There should have been hundreds of people walking along these walkways, standing inside of the buildings. That no one was there disturbed them more than they were willing to let on. Syrex, Seraphal said suddenly, there are several people in that palace up ahead. How many? Asked Syrex. I sense 20, no, 30. That's probably the welcoming party, Azazel joked. Shadows eclipsed them as they walked under a massive archway, which also seconded as a bridge. A set of large steps stood before them. They walked up those, past columns, all the way to the top, where a large double door sat, made from bronze, gleaming brightly as though freshly polished. Syrex walked up to the door and pushed it open. A loud groan resounded around them, ominous in that it was the only sound present. A well-lit interior revealed itself to them as they walked through door, moving slowly in case of an ambush. No one greeted them, however. No one leapt out at them. Their situation was probably more eerie for that very reason. They walked through a hallway made of marble, with open windows on one side and lateral passages on the other, and through it all, they didn't see a single living soul. The presences have all disappeared, Seraphal said. Then she paused. No, wait, there's one presence up ahead. That would probably be Loki, Syrex said. He's likely playing tricks on us. Syrex was the first one to step into the throne room, a responsibility he took upon himself because he was the most powerful among them. It was a large, open space. Colonnades formed a sort of path that led up to a massive throne, upon which Loki, Norse god of trickery, lounged as though he were an indulgent king. Welcome to Asgard, misbegotten creatures of Christianity, Loki said, smiling as he remained where he was, as though he didn't care that 6 of the most powerful Christian figures had come to him. We've come to put a stop to whatever it is you are planning, Michael said, stepping forward. We won't allow you to unleash Ragnarok. Loki smiled before, finally, he stood from his chair in a graceful move that made Michael blink. It was almost as though he'd teleported. You cannot stop Ragnarok, Loki said, and it seemed to be a signal. Seraphal screamed that the presences that had disappeared were back. At the same time, several Norse gods and goddesses appeared before them, surrounded them. Michael recognized a few like Thor, Freya, Baldur, Frigg, Tyr, and Sif, but there were quite a few who he couldn't name right away. Not only had the Norse gods appeared, but a giant winged serpent flew into the room. Michael knew this creature. It was 10 times larger than the ones they had fought at the Colosseum, but there was no mistaking this creature. Magasorma, the real sleeping dragon, the dragon of End, the world's serpent. Michael could see now why he was called the largest dragon in the world. Unlike those clones, he truly was massive, easily spanning a kilometer in length. He was so large only part of his body could fit inside. All of the Norse gods and goddesses were armed. Thor had his infamous hammer, which was said to generate storms with every swing. Freya twirled her spear with the precision of an experienced warrior. Bows and arrows, swords, knives, all manner of weapon was pointed at him, all of them legendary and powerful. Michael wanted to curse himself, to curse them for this plan, but he already knew that there was nothing they could have done. Loki had to be stopped. The problem was that he didn't know if they would be able to stop them, not when they were up against an entire pantheon. For you see, my Christian friends, Ragnarok has already begun, Loki finished, lips twisting into an arrogant sneer. Devil Ninja. After getting over her issues about not having a boyfriend, Rosweiss proved herself to be an excellent teacher. Naruto soon discovered that Rosweiss's serious demeanor lent itself well to teaching. She was also well versed in their lessons, and she explained everything in a way that even Naruto, who couldn't care less about school, could understand. There was just one problem. Rosweiss's figure. More specifically, her B. Of course, this wasn't her fault. If anything, the people to blame were the boys who lacked self-control, which was every boy except for him, Kiba, and a few others. It made him feel bad for the woman. Being like that couldn't be enjoyable. There wasn't much Naruto could do about that. He was just a student. Fortunately, Rosweiss didn't seem to notice the leering looks. Perhaps she was just so serious about everything she did that she was oblivious to how her looks made heads turned. After school, Naruto exited the classroom with Kiba and Rosweiss. With Azazel gone, she was acting as the current advisor. Of course, it wasn't like there was much for her to do. Azazel hadn't done anything either. Really, all she did was watch them as they went about her business. Of course, there was one person who Rosweiss, the serious woman that she was, took issue with. Rosweiss crossed her arms and glared. A likely excuse. I'll have you know that I was Odin's secretary for 2 whole years. I know L, and you are definitely AL. Hey, Issei chuckled in a dark manner that seeped with lecherous intent. You underestimate me. I am not just some L. Oh. Rosweiss raised an eyebrow. Then what are you? Puffing out his chest as though in pride, Issei shouted, I am a super L. Rosweiss took a step back as though she'd just been. Naruto couldn't tell if the redness on her cheeks was due to embarrassment, rage, or both, though he'd bet on it being both. The doors opened during this time, and Koneko walked in alongside Revel and Office. She took one look at the situation, frowned, and then looked at Naruto. I'm guessing the L did something L. She asked. Seems that way. Huh. Koneko accepted this with a nod, then pulled Revel and Office over to the couch. Come on, Yakitori, dragon. I've got some sweets that I'm willing to share with you. Revel sighed. I wish you would stop calling me by that nickname. Not happening. What kind of sweets do you have? Asked Office. It's a kind of mochi. Koneko, Revel, and Office sat together on the couch, and Koneko brought out some mochi that she broke in pieces and shared with Office and Revel. As they be on their treat and spoke amongst each other, Naruto felt his heart lighten. It was nice to see them getting along. Seeing that Irina was still embarrassed, and Rosweiss was still arguing with Issei. Thank you, she muttered. May I ask what happened? I don't mind telling you, but please let me get dressed first. I wonder if this is the result of whatever happened between him and Akeno. Certainly, Issei seemed a lot more confident than before, and he was a lot more lively again. When Akeno had dumped him, he'd been listless. Even after trying to move on, he'd rarely spoken out except during battle. Yet now, here he was, yelling at a woman who was accusing him of being AL. Had this happened months ago, he would have just taken his lumps. Akeno, Rias, and Asia had arrived while Irina was getting dressed. It seemed Asia was trying to placate Issei and Rosweiss, but she wasn't having much success. Rosweiss's face had become red, and for some reason, tears were welling up in her eyes as though she was getting more frustrated by the second. So, what happened? Naruto asked the still blushing Irina. I think it was my fault, she admitted. I had gotten really dirty while helping clean out the gym storage shed. Rias said I could use the shower here, so I did. Then Issei came in and... Quote. Irina's blush told Naruto all he needed to know. I see. Ag. You are so annoying. I didn't do this on purpose. Issei grabbed his hair and shouted. You know, for someone who has such a smoking hot body, you've got a really personality. That's gonna make it hard for you to get a boyfriend. That was the wrong thing to say. Naruto barely had a second to think, before Rosweiss began wailing again. You think I don't know that? She cried to the now shell-shocked Issei. Tears streamed down her face like waterfalls as she sank to her knees. I know that men don't like me. I know that. I know I'll never get a boyfriend. No, I didn't mean. That's why everyone calls me the Valkyrie who could never get a boyfriend. Look, I only meant, it's like this. WAAAA. Devil Ninja. Almost from the get-go, Syrinx and the other 5 who'd come to Asgard with him, had been forced to fight separate battles. Not only were they being forced to separate fights, but they were fighting 5-on-1. Overwhelmed and outnumbered. It was the worst-case scenario. No, it might have been worse than the worst-case scenario. Syrinx was fighting a completely defensive battle. Against the forces of Thor, Freya, Frigg, Hermod, and Sif, it was all he could do. Thor struck at him with his hammer, a mighty swing that caused lightning to burst from the legendary weapon, Mjolnir, and raced toward him. The ground in front of him, rocks and marble, was ripped from the ground. It scattered everywhere as though more than just lightning was flying Syrex's way. The air itself exploded and burst as though being torn apart by a storm. Syrinx would have moved out of the way. No sane person would have taken this attack head-on. He couldn't, however. Freya and Frigg were already attacking him in a pincer maneuver, and Sif was immediately behind him, 2 swords in hand and ready to skewer him. If he wanted to make out of this, he needed to deal with the attack in these 3. Creating a magic circle in front of him, Syrinx unleashed as much power as possible without losing control. The lightning from Mjolnir si his magic circle. The powers of destruction clashed with the powers of Asgard's mightiest warrior. The air between them combusted, blasting at his face, making his eyes water. However, he couldn't afford to remain idle. Freya, Frigg, and Sif were coming in from the other 3 sides. If he didn't deal with them, he'd be done for. This would be so much easier if I could just K them. Releasing a loud shout, Syrinx temporarily turned his entire body the powers of destruction, and then sent a good portion of that power at the 3 attacking him from behind. The results was that all 3 women were blasted away. Sadly, he didn't see Hermod hiding beneath him until it was almost too late. Fire flared through his arm and up his shoulder. It wasn't terrible. However, it distracted him long enough for Thor to unleash another attack, one that would hit both him and Hermod. He's willing to attack his own brethren. With a grunt, Syrinx grabbed Hermod and threw him out of the way of the attack, thus taking the attack head-on. Snarling in concentration, left with no other option, Syrinx once more became the powers of destruction. Everything around them shook. The ground, the columns, the walls, everything. Cracks appeared along the ground as Syrinx released his power, which helped negate Mjolnir's lightning attack at the cost of damaging the surroundings. Because he was nothing but pure energy, nothing could hurt him. At the same time, he was pretty much destroying everything. Knowing that he couldn't continue releasing this much power if he wanted to save the Norse gods from Loki's mind control, he sealed his powers back up the moment Thor's attack dissipated. Syrinx looked at the 5 surrounding him once more. With Thor in front, Frigg and Freya on either side, and Hermod standing behind him with Sif, he was pretty much penned in. And he wasn't the only one having trouble. Nearly a dozen meters away, battling through the skies, visible through the now destroyed palace, Michael was being bombarded with attacks from Magni, Tyr, Not, Skadi, and Air. He might have had it even rougher than Syrinx. Tyr, god of war, clashed against Michael's light swords with his massive war axe. He should have been slow wielding such an unwieldy weapon, yet he swung the damn thing like it was a feather. Michael was being pushed back, and matters only worsened when Magni Stay, Archangel of Heaven, leader of the Heavenly Gate, was able to avoid the attack, but it was a near thing. What's more, he ran into Skadi, who used her powers of winter to freeze Michael's wings. As the Archangel of Heaven fell, his wings no longer able to maintain height, Tyr and Magni attacked in unison. The result was a devastating shockwave that Syrinx could feel even from where he stood. The remaining columns of the palace were blasted away. What remained of the floor shattered. Syrinx was forced to become the powers of destruction once more, lest he be squashed by the overwhelming force. When the fierce, howling winds and massive pressure ceased, he returned to his original state. He was standing inside of a crater. Flying out of the crater, Syrinx surveyed the scene. The palace was gone. The throne where Loki had been sitting was no more. He couldn't see his previous opponents anywhere, and his companions were not in his immediate vicinity. 2 massive serpents of ice rose in the distance, attacking a dragon 4 times their size, Megasorma. Earth-shattering roars echoed from the battle. Megasorma bit one of the serpents, tearing through it as though it was made of paper. The other attacked it while it was distracted. It didn't seem to do anything. The ice serpent's teeth shattered against Megasaur's hard skin. Then a massive beam was launched from the dragon's mouth, and an explosion so massive and powerful that the world around him was whited out with light erupted against the ground. Syrinx was given no more time to search for his other companions. Thor, Freya, Frigg, Sif, and Hermod surrounded him again. They weren't alone. Loki also stood before him, and what's more, Loki was holding an unconscious Gabrielle by the neck. Her 12 wings hung limp. Her white dress was torn, revealing more skin than she would have probably been comfortable showing off. He could tell she was alive. She was still breathing. However, her injuries were extensive. If she didn't get help soon. She tried to save them, Loki said, and suddenly, 5 more gods and goddesses from Norse mythology appeared around Syrinx. Lips twisted the sort of disturbing grin one would expect from a madman, Loki continued. It was a foolish notion. She should have just killed them. You and those in your mythology are far too soft. I knew it, Syrinx muttered. You're using the same method to control these people that you used for the ones who fought us at the Colosseum. However, those devices aren't something a person like you can create. Who's your backer? Backer. HMPH. Loki scoffed as though the concept of him having a backer was absurd. Those fools in the Chaos Brigade aren't my backers. I'm merely using them for my own purposes. Once I've placed you and all those who came with you under my control, I'll begin my campaign to destroy this pathetic world, along with those idiots from the Chaos Brigade. Now, then, I tire of talking, so I'm going to have these people defeat you. Don't worry, I won't kill you. Your powers are far too useful for me. That said, you're going to become my unwilling S until Ragnarok claims you. As his words signified an end to the conversation, the now 10 gods and goddesses began the battle against Syrinx anew. Left with no other choice but to go all out, Syrinx summoned all of his power. The energy he released crashed the Asgardians, sending all but the strongest flying. Syrinx didn't stop there. Having unleashed everything he had, his body quickly transformed, converting energy, the powers of destruction, which the Bale clan was well known for. As its name suggested, the powers of destruction was, in essence, the power to annihilate everything it touched. One could consider it the erasure of all that existed. Only a being that was even more powerful than an ultimate class devil, such as the heavenly dragons or the Ouroboros dragon, could withstand this incredible power. The ability that Syrinx was using was known as Aura of Destruction. This was Syrinx's true form. It was when his entire body was completely transformed the powers of destruction, the powers condensed a human shape. While in this form, his power was immense, easily surpassing the powers of the original Satan. At the same time, he didn't have complete control over it, so the powers of destruction spread the longer he remained in this form. So, this is your true form, Syrinx, Loki said as he floated in the air, far enough from Syrinx that his powers could not reach him. Gabrielle was still in his grasp. I see now why so many fear you. In this form, you are easily one of the most powerful beings in this universe. However, not even you can defeat the entire forces of Asgard. Syrinx said nothing. He could have spoken if he wanted to, but he was already busy. Thor came in with his hammer swinging. Syrinx s the hammer apart, destroying it, no, annihilating it until nothing remained. Another burst of power sent Thor flying. Just touching it caused the weapon, legendary and powerful, to evaporate as though it was water disappearing on a hot summer day. Her armor disappeared as she was sent flying. Fortunately, Syrinx was able to hold back enough that he hadn't killed her. She would live. The dagger, which was being swung by Hermod, vanished as it touched his body, which was now nothing more than condensed powers of destruction. In return, Hermod was sent flying by a kick to the face. Syrinx didn't know if his powers were no longer under his complete control. However, between himself and his comrades and them, Syrinx was going to choose himself and his comrades. Protecting your companions was only natural. Everything became a blur of colors, streaks of light that attacked him from all sides, images that he could barely discern. Syrinx fought. He fought and fought and fought. He had no idea how long he battled, how many people stepped up to face him, how many were killed or injured. He just didn't know. Time lost its meaning. The world had become shades of red as everything was consumed by his powers of destruction, which spread across Asgard at a slow but steady pace. It could have been hours. It could have been minutes. At some point, a voice penetrated the fog of battle. I'd suggest you stop, it said. Unless you want your companions to s. Syrinx did stop. It took a concerted effort, but he reined his powers in, though what had already leaked out continued causing havoc. The world around him was different from the one he'd been in before. The palace belonging to the Asgardians was gone. Syrinx was standing in a crater several kilometers deep, the results of his own powers wreaking havoc on this world. He didn't see any of his opponents. Had he accidentally killed them? It was entirely possible. His powers in that form were beyond his control. They might have been annihilated and he'd never know it. You really are powerful, Loki said. He was floating above Syrinx, uninjured. Many of the Asgardians were also with him, as was Magasorma. Not only that, but they were all holding one of his companions, whose beaten and battered frames sent a shock through his body. I must admit, Loki continued, I never expected you to be this powerful, but now that I have seen your power for myself, I want to subdue you all the more and take your powers for my own. What makes you think I'll let you do that? Asked Syrinx. Because if you don't, I'll kill your friends, Loki said. Then I'll just place these 5 under my control and use them to attack your little sister. Loki chuckled when Syrinx stiffened from fear and rage. Yes, I'll use them to attack your sister. I won't kill her, not right away. I'll rape her first, and then I'll let the Asgardians rape her. Slowly, through a combination of torture, rape, and mental attacks, I'll break her mind and soul before dismembering her and using her body to build myself a new throne. Syrinx gritted his teeth. He didn't think Loki was bluffing. That was something he would do, and while he wanted to have confidence that Naruto could protect her. All right, he said with a sigh. I'll surrender. Good. Loki showed off his white teeth with a wide grin. With you in my pocket, we're one step closer to Ragnarok. Naruto, Syrinx thought as the Asgardians descended upon him like a pack of ravenous beasts. I beg you, please, protect my little sister. Devil Ninja. 2 weeks passed by in the blink of an eye, and not a whole lot happened during that time, at least, nothing that concerned Koneko. Some new rumors had spread about Naruto seducing the hot silver-haired teacher. Apparently, someone had caught them chatting in the nurse's office several days ago and that had somehow turned. Koneko didn't know about what had really gone on during the time where Naruto and Rosweiss were speaking in the nurse's office, but she somehow doubted they had been F's. It was the weekend. As usual, Koneko was spending the day with Ravel and Office. They had been spending more time together, possibly because they were in the same class, and it had gotten to the point where several people were calling them the Lowly Alliance because they were all small and cute, or something like that. Such opinions didn't really concern Koneko. Can you believe the nerve of that store clerk? Asked Ravel. That disgusting man was staring at us. Koneko shrugged. Did you think Eyes was the only L? I know he's not the only L, Ravel muttered. I just don't like how that guy was staring at us. Naruto stares at us in a similar way. That's different. I'm just messing with you, Yakitori. So, all humans stare at us like this? Asked Office. Pretty much, Koneko said. Though only a certain type of man stares at little girls like us. A certain type of man. A lolicon, Koneko said, and then added, like Naruto. But is Naruto really a lolicon? Asked Ravel. He's dating Ria-sama, so I don't really think he meets that criteria. True enough. Naruto is the kind of person who enjoys all types of girls, Koneko agreed. They were on their way home from visiting a nearby sweet shop. Koneko had gone there because she wanted to buy some more candy, but Ravel had gone with her because she wanted to steal their recipes and use them in a cake for Naruto. She and Naruto often had tea together. Koneko didn't know what they talked about during that time. That was Ravel's time with him. On the other hand, Office just seemed to be following them because it amused her, or maybe it was because she was studying their beef for future reference. She couldn't tell. As they walked down the street, a strange smell caught her attention. She recognized this smell. Koneko. Ravel shouted as she ran off. Where are you going? Koneko didn't answer. She was too busy following the scent. This smell, it must be, it was. Devil Ninja. Rias was hard at work. Sitting behind her desk, Akeno standing behind her, she diligently read through numerous reports. Most of the reports dealt with Gremory clan holdings in the human world. The Gremory clan owned several businesses here in the human world, and since she was living there, her father had placed her in charge of managing them. This was also a test to see how well she could manage people. It seems like we've had more work these past 2 weeks, Akeno said as she diligently refilled Ria's cup with steaming hot tea. That's what happens when more than half of the 3 factions alliance goes off to deal with another pantheon, Rias said, taking a sip of her tea. Thank you. Yufufu, you're welcome. Setting the teacup down, Rias leaned back and looked at the extra stack of papers that she had. These ones had nothing to do with the clan. These ones revolved around the 3 factions. They ranged from simple requests to outright demands, to dealing with logistics and funding for people seeking to move to Kuo. Among the list of people who would be coming to live in Kuo, all of the people who had taken part in the rating game, minus a few of the young devils, were requesting permission to live here. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.